For those who have not joined us before, a bit about byProduct. We are a product community. We're on WhatsApp. We try to do monthly, but not always, but fairly regular online events, people from the community talking about topics and their experiences. And, people who are interested in carrying on the conversation, more than welcome to join us in the WhatsApp channel. We'll have details of that at the end of the presentation. So who are we? I'm Mike. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm head of growth at AmSource. Nikhil is our other co-founder. He is based over in Berlin. He's currently a product leader at Quanta, who was previously at Penta. As soon as you're ill today, Nikhil, I won't ask you to jump on camera. Charlie, he is the one who makes everything look good and come together. So I'm not taking any of the credit for that. And my colleague Dave also helps spread the word, mainly across our UK part of the business. So I think we're now going to pass over to Dr. Elsa van der Berg.
I'm going to stop sharing, and then I think Elsa's going to do her thing.
Yep. You disabled screen sharing. I'm a participant now.
Make you host.
Yeah. Okay.
It was nearly smooth, nearly.
So here we are. I'm Elsa van der Berg. You see a picture of me here staring expectantly into the future, which is kind of how I like to look. So I have been in tech startups for about a little over 10 years, in Berlin, in Germany, but also in US-based startups. And in those 10 years, I saw a lot of problems reoccurring. So I decided to start my own collective of product experts called Sonderhaus, where we help companies, specifically SaaS companies, set up a customer-centric product strategy. So we kind of help them build products that their customers love. Of course, that's something that everybody wants, but we do it very much through customer discovery, data analytics, and a little bit of product sense. And since I focus on SaaS companies, of course, PLG is a very big chunk of that. So that's what I'll be talking about. If you want, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I would like that. So feel free to scan over here or to find me. There's a great search bar. All right, so let's dive in. What is PLG, product-led growth, and why should anyone care? Well, the principle is kind of on this image over here. It's not very new, not very groundbreaking. The idea is to allow customers to try before they buy. But this was quite new in software for a while. About 10 years ago, the idea of PLG started spreading in SaaS. And to explain why it's good for consumers, let's go back to sales-led growth, what that looks like. For a consumer, if they are interested in the product, they will have to first arrange a demo call. So they'll go on the website or the lead gen form. They have to ask for a demo call, maybe wait a few days, a week, and then sit through that hour-long demo call, after which they need to decide whether they want the product or not. They need to sign a contract and commit to paying. And if they've gone through all of those things, they can start using the product and maybe experience some value. That's the idea. And product-led growth, PLG, turns that upside down, of course. So there's interest and they can start using it immediately, not once, but multiple times. They can really start seeing successes within the product or getting value, as the PLG people like to call it. And then maybe they have to pay at some point. Not everybody pays. From a business perspective, what is the idea? In sales-led, we're used to starting at the top of the pyramid. So we go to decision makers or economic buyers. And the idea with PLG is that you target the people at the bottom of the pyramid, the end users or the influencers, get them super excited about the product. Ideally, they can use it on their own. They don't even need to go to a decision maker, or they love it so much, your product spreads like an oil stain within the organization, and they start knocking on the door of the decision maker, so that you come in hot as a company, and it's ideally much easier to close a deal. So that makes things a little bit different, right? Also the fact that products are free, there's a free trial or a freemium in many cases. So PLG companies need to worry about different things to SLG companies, or they need to worry on a different level. And the first thing to talk about is the new user experience and retention. Of course, I was one of the people who said, yeah, okay, but every company cares about the new user experience and retention, right? Sales-led companies also would like to maybe retain their customers. But for PLG companies, it's a bit different because they simply can't make money if they can't get people very excited when they first use the platform, if they can't manage to activate users and manage to keep them coming back, keep them satisfied. And for a sales-led company, of course, they've already made some money before they have to get users through these gates. So the focus is very much there. And I very much like the advice of treating the new user experience as a separate product from the real products, because you really need to make sure that you understand everybody who's coming into your product, so you can guide them towards value into the products. You can give them maybe even a personalized journey so they can achieve their goals. And this onboarding never ends, right? It's not like you onboard them once, now they know. They need to keep learning within your product in a way that fits what they're ready for at that time. And the second big thing, of course, imagine you have a big pool of non-paying customers. Ideally, you would like to convert some of them into paying customers. And in order to do that, you need to pick up on signals very well. You can kind of imagine that a big section of your non-paying customers will probably never convert into paying customers. They tend to be referred to as basic customers. And on the other hand, you have customers who could convert. And some of them will do that on their own. They will upgrade, and some of them will not. Some of them will need a sales push. So PLG companies talk about ICPs, which is called an ideal customer profile, which is here. Now there it is. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, it's not working. There. The firmographic, environmental, and behavioral attributes that are correlated to the companies that you think will be your most valuable companies. So first myth debunked. It's not like sales has no role at all in a PLG company. There tends to still be a sales motion. But those salespeople tap into the PLG customer base and try to pick out the leads that are likely to be monetized, that you can sell to. And these are called product qualified accounts, and the buyers in there are product qualified leads. This sounds all very technical and complicated. The point being, as a PLG company, you need to understand the signals that people are ripe to be sold to. So data tracking and interpreting user behavior becomes very important. There are companies that can help you do that, like Journey.io. All right, so I made a little mind map of things that kind of belong to PLG. I hear some talking. Yeah.
Shit.
Is it just me hearing a conversation?
Sorry, whoever's speaking, would you mind just
Super, wir können es genießen.
mic on mute?
Der war echt gut. Ja, also davon.
Charlie, you need to mute Surf Phone.
Elsa, can you do it? Because I've made you host. So.
Okay. No.
I think it's done.
It's done?
Good stuff.
Yep.
Okay, let's see what happens. So I've made a little mind map of terms that kind of belong to PLG. Of course, the free trial, a freemium, a reverse trial, it's kind of the hybrid version of both. Sampling, but also self-service, right? So I talk often about free users, but also the idea of allowing people to use your product on their own. For example, browsing a database of freelancers like Fiverr does is also a form of PLG. And of course, in-app purchases. A lot of product veterans who have been in the business for like 20 or 30 years, they tell me what nonsense now calling this PLG. We've been kind of doing this stuff for years. For example, all apps tend to be free, or the popular apps are free, and you only monetize within the app. So it's not such a crazy new idea. And I agree to that. But at the same time, having a free trial does not mean that you have product-led growth. I, for example, made the mistake several years ago. I worked at a company called Data Wallet, and we decided to do a free trial. because all of our US counterparts had a free trial, and it was 14 days, so ours was 14 days. But we were not very clear on who was going into that free trial, who our target audience really was. And we weren't very clear on what they should achieve there. So we had a walkthrough, we showed them some stuff, but we didn't do the work into optimizing to getting people to find value within that free trial. Why? Because our primary driver for growth was still top-down selling. We had sales agents who would go to enterprise clients. So you can have a free trial, but it doesn't have to be PLG. And the core question you have to ask is, can customers easily experience the core value of your product? And is that the primary driver of growth? So let's take a step back. Why do companies even want PLG? Why do we care? And the first argument comes from the customer perspective. You can argue in many cases, it's the most customer-centric choice. Simply put, customers prefer to self-serve. They don't want to wait for you. Yes, obvious, but not for everybody, right? So there it already goes into the target audience. I think if you target, for example, a big enterprise client, the end user might be very far away from the decision maker. So he might have to jump through a lot of hoops to get the tool approved. And he might not even be allowed to download or to start using tools without maybe IT security processes. So in that case, the friction point isn't that people want to try before they buy. The friction point is that the buying decision itself is very hard. So if that is the case, it's not really the customer-centric choice, right? So it's not like a clear-cut answer. It's always like this. But for some tools, of course, it is. The second big reason is more from a company perspective, is this flywheel effect. One of the key issues that I've seen startups struggle with over the years is that paid advertising is very expensive and getting less and less effective. And another issue that I've seen B2B companies struggle with is that sales cycles tend to be very long and conversion rates from cold outreach quite low. And the idea is that PLG solves this, right? Firstly, of course, the sales conversion rates will be much higher if you're not reaching out cold, but you're reaching out to buyers who work with a lot of end users who are already very much enjoying your product, right? It comes in a lot warmer. And at the same point, you have hopefully a lot of free users who you might not be able to monetize, and that's okay, because they are keeping your flywheel spinning. They are getting in other customers, so they work as your marketing or as your sales team. So you organically refill your funnel. That's the dream, of course, that companies want to get to. So this is another reason why they want it, right? We've seen other companies do it very well. And we've seen this kind of graphs where we're like, okay, we all want to be like Twilio and Atlassian. We want these kind of market caps. And there has been data that PLG companies are on average valued higher. They have higher valuations.
Also, can I just jump in for a sec? You know, when I made you host, it took away my ability to let people in the room.
Okay.
So is it possible for you to let people in if you just go down to participants?
I would love to. You did it. And another one.
Yeah.
All right. We good?
Yeah, I think so. If that's everyone. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So it all sounds great, PLG, right? We should all want it, but it's not for everyone. And I think that's very important to understand. I think it is a bad fit if you have a very complex product, and if that complex product cannot be broken down in smaller components. There are some products where you just need a human to train people on how to use it. And the whole point of PLG is that people should be able to use your product on their own without much external guidance. They should be able to get to value. And the second one, I think, is enterprise clients for the reasons I outlined before. Not all enterprise clients, but most. Then there's also a good fit, which I almost call like a no choice fit, which is these industries where it's kind of table stakes. For example, if you look at design tools, if I want to design a simple looking social media thing, I expect it to be free, right? Because Canva is free, Kittle is free, Visma is free. You can't step into that space and start charging, or it's very hard because you have to compete with free. But I think a great fit is the kind of industries that have, for which you can create software that is simple to use, maybe target smaller organizations where you can get to the buyer quite quickly, where it's not table stakes, where it's something new, right? So I have here an image of a warehouse, for example, if you do software that helps warehouse workers keep track of their inventory, whatever, but there you can still cut through the noise. So I always recommend companies to look for more this, because on the good fit side, you kind of have to do it, but you don't cut through the noise anymore. And I think the key lesson, the key takeaway is that you don't determine your go-to-market or growth strategy, but your target audience does. So now the next question, is your organization ready for PLG? And does that mean it's time to dump your sales-led motion? I think it's very important to understand that you need to undergo 3 fundamental company-wide mindset shifts. It can't be one person deciding we should do this. It can't be product on their own. It has to be company-wide. And the first one, you need a culture of experimentation and measuring also the results of the experiments. I have worked with a lot of companies who said, of course we experiment, but every experiment should be a success, right? The KPIs always have to go up. And if that is your mentality, you're not really set up for it, because the nature of experiments is that some of them fail. Actually, 50 to 75% of experiments fail, even the ones that are super well researched. And you need that experimentation if you want to create a really great user experience, right? You're going to have to be ready for that. And the second one is you need this laser focus on your ideal customer profile and their persona. You need to be super clear organization-wide who your product is for. This cannot be fluffy or fuzzy. It has to be very concise. You need to know who it's for. If you're not, that's okay, especially if you're an early stage startup, you might just not know yet, right? You have an idea for your value proposition and you don't know yet whom it resonates with. I would say wait with your PLG motion. Start with sales-led and build in some demo calls, maybe for a year. So you get to speak with your prospects and figure out who they are and what they're trying to achieve. And when you know and you're certain, then you can move to PLG. And last but not least, you have to put engagement and retention before monetization and expansion. You can't be jumping on the phone with your free users within one day trying to sell to them. That's not the way.
I think there's someone else waiting in the lobby again. Sorry.
I
think it's Wolfgang who was just kicked out.
All right. Now I can you still see the screen? It's fine.
Yep.
So should we pick product-led versus sales-led? So here's a quick overview of some of the many famous product-led growth companies who have freemium models. Loads of them have freemium models or a free trial. But what's important to note is that all of them also have a big sales department. So they use account-based selling or outbound sales for their enterprise clients. So what I would like to say is that it's not necessarily either or, it can very easily be both product-led growth and sales-led growth, like a hybrid structure. This one, the animation is a bit broken. In most cases, you can start with a PLG engine when you are in the low tier and mid tier, upon which there's a sales-led engine or product-led sales. And then later on top, when you move to enterprise, you add account-based selling. Or more the strategy that I mentioned before, when you're early stage, you start with sales-led. And once you've learned enough in these demo calls, you can add product-led. So I definitely don't think it's either or. So just some final words of wisdom, and then I'm done. If you do consider adding a PLG motion, be prepared. I put here a picture of a restaurant owner in an empty restaurant, right? Once you open your doors, it doesn't mean that the right people will come flocking in immediately. You need patience, you need time, you need a willingness to recalibrate and learn and iterate. But if you are a good fit company and you're understanding these things, you're willing to do these things, then I would say go for it and contact me if you need help.
Great stuff. Thanks, Elsa.
Okay, I'll stop the share.
So I guess we'll open the floor for questions, but I'm going to jump in first with my question. It looks like if you want to do PLG, that there's a lot of investment, either in time, resources, and ultimately money to get things set up for PLG. And would that be fair to say? And is there like a general rule of thumb of how much time or effort might go into something? Because I guess these days as well, you know, if you're a startup, you're thinking about runway, you're thinking about, am I getting investment again? And if you put all this time and effort to try and get the perfect persona and get the users in, and they're not going to buy anything straight away, like, you know, at what point does that become, I suppose, more dangerous than not doing it?
So I think you can somehow, if I bend things a bit, compare it a bit to SEO, right? It's kind of a thing that you built and it will pay off over time. So absolutely, I think like PLG companies, they have this kind of pre-product market fit phase where they already figure out their ICP and their personas, because without those things, it doesn't make sense to start running. You will get in the wrong free accounts. In terms of costs, the highest cost, the most important thing is internal alignment, right? You need to all be on board with this, and you need to all understand who you are serving. And you need to also kind of reshuffle the organization for everything to point sort of towards the product, right? And so marketing is intertwined with the product. Content is, for instance, interactive demos and things that lead into the product. Your sales team picks leads out of the PLG motion. So it's more investment into how you set up your company. The money invest itself is, of course, less than paid advertising, right? In a sense. However, even to get the flywheel started, you need to drive the first users there. So there will be some classical ways of actually filling up the free user base to begin with. It's not that they will naturally gravitate there. So I think it is something to build when you are ready, right? When you have that clarity, when you're ready for it. And exactly factor in not necessarily too much cost, but time is very important. So you can do something else on the side, right? If you need quick, you can do paid advertising. It's more like an organic slow burn.
Cool, good. We've got a question from Nikhil. Nikhil, do you want me to ask, or are you?
He's far too ill to be asking it himself.
I mean, just about product market fit. What role does it play in the PLG process overall?
So I've had a lot of conversations about this, and a lot of people have told me that product market fit is more important for PLG companies, which I find hard to accept. I think it's very important for any company. It's just in a sense that product market fit is very much combined with retention, right? There's many metrics to help you calculate whether you have reached product market fit. However, it's also a feeling thing. It's an emotional thing almost, right? Are you drowning in demand? But one of the metrics that measures product market fit is about sustainable, profitable retention, right? Can you keep people coming back without paying them for it, without giving out discounts? And that very much goes hand in hand with PLG, because of course, PLG companies can only monetize if they have achieved that profitable retention. So in that sense, the two are very much intertwined. Does that make sense? Does it answer your question?
It does, Elsa. Thank you.
Perfect.
I can't find an automated way of putting my hand up, so I'll put it up for real. I think one of the things that you said was lots of insights, but one in particular. I think what strikes me is that, you know, it's not the aim to be to drive product-led growth and get to PLG. The aim is to get to customers who will pay you money, and PLG is one of those ways of doing it. And I think that's really important to recognise. I mean, I know this is a webinar about PLG, and we all get excited about it and so on. It has its place, and as the first question actually sort of alluded to, you've got to kind of find a way to make a bit of money to feed that machine as well. And I think it's getting that balance right that's very important.
Absolutely, I completely agree. So I also wanted to be here as not another PLG cheerleader. I feel like there's a lot of that going on, but I have spoken to also very seasoned business leaders who understand it this way, right? Just like if you are a customer-driven company, which most software companies or SaaS companies, startups try to be, the question is always, does this fit for my target audience and does this fit for my market? Not, is this something I would love to do, right? It's the same with if you apply technology, you don't pick a technology that you think is cool. It has to be fit for purpose. The same with your go-to-market strategy or growth strategy. Is it fit for your purpose?
And I'll sort of carry on chipping in. I think also you know, as you mentioned, this is company wide, and I think product always is. The thing I love about being in product is I get to meet everybody in the business every minute of every day, because you know, sales is an important part of what I do, as is marketing, as are customers, and all of those good things. And those relationships don't, in their own right, they don't change being product led. But what I find really interesting, and I don't have any evidence or data particularly on this at the moment, is just how accepting the sales guys are going to be of product qualified leads. They will, of course, argue with marketing colleagues about what exactly a marketing qualified lead is, and is it good enough to become a sales accepted lead, etc. So I can imagine some sales leaders where I'll be having those kind of discussions.
Yes,
for sure. So it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on that.
so I think it's very difficult to get this right? So the thing is, PLG is not a band-aid that you will slap on and everything will be easy. Not at all. And especially, it's like, oh yeah, PLG will be great because we will have this great cross-departmental collaboration. That's not how it works. You need to have the great cross-departmental collaboration to make PLG work. And this sounds I always talk about the theory in the books being very different from the reality that I've seen on the ground. And this is very hard, especially in these organizations that I know that they have product-led sales who are feeding off this growth-led motion, and this product-led growth motion. And then you have these account-based sellers who sit on top, who might be different people who are going for enterprise. Firstly, you have sellers who need to be motivated in a different way than before, in a sense, because compensation schemes used to be like in a dark past, is getting less bad, but very much about acquisition, right? Get them through the door and then you get your money. This has to be shifted very much to retention, of course, and activation and engagement, which is not easy to get right? It's like a lot of factors. And every company will have slightly different factors. But then you need to make sure, if there's not enough PQLs, right? If the signals are not showing that there's enough people who are ready to be monetized, you have still these product-led salespeople sitting there who might get impatient, right? Because they have commissions. So there are real humans at play here. And the same is with these enterprise sellers. They might not be so successful. They might get bored, and they'll start maybe cannibalizing on what the product-led salespeople are doing. So in the end, in the books, it all sounds very easy and perfect. And yes, you'll have these signals of the PQLs and you'll just go in there and you'll sell to them. But in reality, we're still an organization with real humans with their own incentives, both intrinsic and external. So getting it to work in real life is not as easy.
Okay. Abdo, you've got a question?
Yes. Thank you very much for this very concise presentation and very clear. And I really appreciate your clear communication in it, and using clear words and not really using wishy-washy veiled words that we usually do as product people. And it's always refreshing, you know, when you're amongst your kin, so to speak, we can speak freely, and I really appreciate that. My question is, yeah, you mentioned that this has been around for a bunch of years, roughly a decade. And I would tend to agree, maybe it was there even and had different names, right? Different business model, whatever, freemium or whatever. My question is basically, in your observation, what has changed in the practice of product-led growth from, like, let's say 7 years ago compared to today?
I think a lot has changed, firstly, of course, in knowledge about it, right? Now it's a huge buzzword, right? Almost a hype. We hear about it every day. That is annoying, of course, for some people who have known about it for 10 years. I'm talking about 10 years. This is, I think, when the term PLG was coined, I think by OpenView. But shareware and freemiums and free trials have been around for way before that, of course, right? So even the term PLG is not that new. It just kind of blew up very much ever since. And I think that does also have benefits. It has annoying side effects because, of course, for some people, it's like, what do you mean this is a new idea? I've also had conversation with people where I said, what do you mean it's a new idea to try to get users to value? It's kind of what we've been trying to do all along. But because there's so much interest in it, there are a lot of engines that make it easier for companies to get started. For example, one of the complexities, of course, is to understand who is a product qualified account and who is a product qualified lead. Who are the people you need to be prodding into to try to monetize them or expand them? And now there's a lot of literature out there on how to calculate these scores. There are tools that can help you do it. So what I like is to bring it so much in the forefront, talk about so much what are the typical problems that PLG companies, because we put a name on it, makes it easier incur. We can start solving these and have literature about it and have tools for it and engines for it.
Not to be asking you to do some advertising, but what would be your go-to tools and definitions of product qualified leads?
So go-to tools, I've actually been comparing data analytics tools, and especially I've been looking at how well the classical ones like Amplitude and Mixpanel do in the context of PLG, because I consult and advise a lot of PLG SaaS companies, and they talk to me about this. And I think there are so many user behavior tracking programs that it's very hard to keep track, and there's more and more popping up. But I see a bit of benefits. For example, Journey.io, which I mentioned earlier, I like them very much. I speak to them as well. They focus solely on PLG, which means they do things a bit differently, because the general data analytics platforms, they think feature first. They are there for product people to see how much is a feature being used, right? So you have really like how many people are clicking here, how many are using this. And a PLG company needs to think a bit the other way around, needs to think user first. How's this user behaving? And there's another complexity with users, is that they tend to behave to multiple accounts, right? There's one user who can go in with his personal email address, and then he shifts to his work email address, and then maybe he's an agency, so he has multiple companies, but it's the same person. So PLG companies have some complexities to deal with. And that's why I like companies like Journey.io, because they are made for this. They have like out of the box functionality, also for your industry benchmarks to say, hey, these are the signals to look out for. This is how we pick out PQAs, PQLs, and this is a playbook, what to do with them. So because of their focus on PLG, I think they make it a little bit easier than these more general data analytics platforms can do everything, but you have to set it all up by yourself. But yeah, in the end, it's your choice. And about PQA, PQL, you asked me to define. I think it all starts with defining your ICP, right? This is this ideal customer profile. So you have to figure out which type of companies are most likely to become my most valuable clients. So that's one circle kind of that you have in mind. And then you need to figure out for you, for your tool, what does good engagement look like? What are the signals that somebody is warm enough that you should start reaching out to them? So there is no one clear-cut definition. It depends very much on your tool. Like, what kind of recurrence are you expecting? What are you expecting people to do? So you can measure that and figure out, okay, is this person hot enough? Can we start? And if there is an overlap between those signals of engagements and your ICP, you have a product qualified account. Then the big complexity is that within that product qualified account, if you have now the sales motion, you need to talk to the buyer, right? It doesn't help you to talk to the end user. You need to now find the buyer. And that's not so easy, because often the buyer is not using the platform because he's not an end user, which is where this kind of product-led sales and product-led marketing motions can come in to help you find that buyer. And that buyer is called the product qualified lead in the end. I like that PLG uses a lot of abbreviation, and they tend to be 3 letters.
I think Alex has a question.
Yes, I actually have to. Hi, Ilse. Sorry, I was late a little bit. Maybe you've touched on this, but so my first question is about maybe jumping on this wagon of like B2C motion, right, versus B2B. And I think that in B2C, one part that is also much easier is that it's oriented like towards a consumer, and generally the volumes of users and visitors, let's say, are much higher, right? So you can do with experimentation only. While in B2B, especially when you're not very, famous, let's say, or mature organization, you don't want to also miss your opportunity that much, right? So you have to work with the clients where you may not have a very big volume, right? So through a lot of data, but also with some accounts, you have to be more careful, right? And you have to have more of a human touch sometime involved. Yeah. So maybe you can explain a little bit, how do you do this experimentation that is so needed for the PLG, both on the activation side and on the engagement and monetization side, right? While not, because like what I've seen in my personal experience, right? People are afraid. They're basically afraid to lose customers.
Of course.
Right? But
yeah, and that's so fair, you know, that's the kind of the thing. And that's also like most of the companies that I've worked for before, they were all like this. That's why I say this, let's experiment, but please no failures, because we have clients.
Exactly.
Right? Completely understand that. It also depends very much who you are targeting, right? I think generally, if you mainly target enterprise clients, if that is your bread and butter, as said before, maybe PLG is not the right growth strategy for you to begin with, which doesn't mean you shouldn't be experimenting and making things better for your enterprise clients. One way to experiment, of course, is not to push new ideas, new features to everybody, like roll it out immediately. I personally focus very much on customer discovery and data analytics, to do a lot of work, product discovery, continuous product discovery up front, to try to make sure that the decisions I make are the right ones, which still doesn't mean that 100% of them are great, right? It's still, whenever you release something, it's kind of an experiment, which is why I would release it maybe not to my most important clients. And also, for example, through data tracking, a friend of mine told me this story the other day, that they removed a stupid button that they said, okay, nobody's using this stupid button. They didn't have data analytics. And then their biggest clients apparently was using that button all the time, right? So they were very upset. If you have proper data tracking, you know who is using that button. So you know who to check with first, right? So the first thing, which I would say, is have proper data analytics so you are not blind. And a lot of people tell me, of course we are data driven, but again, the gap between reality and the books is quite big. And I know a lot of companies who are not aware of that, who don't have that visibility. So I think that would be a very important starting point. But I don't agree with the idea that you can't experiment when you have clients on board. It's just, you have to, of course, be careful and not go in blind, right? And not just roll out new stuff to all of your clients at once.
Yeah, makes sense. And my second question is about, like, PLG basically means product-led marketing, right? And that also means a lot of work done together by the product and marketing teams, right? Maybe, sorry, I'm just coming up with my question on the go, right? Maybe you can share from your experience, what are the main, let's say, common objectives of marketing and product teams? And like, I think that I'm leaning more towards like how to make sure that they are working well together, right? How to know that they're working well together, or when they're experiencing problems and they're actually siloed. Are there any signs of that?
Yes, so I actually start with every startup that I work with. I do this workshop, which is about alignment on who is it for. And I think that is like the key thing that facilitates everything else, is at least when everybody is on board on who is the target audience. And this is not a one-off exercise. This is something that should be repetitive. Because you keep learning, right? First, you have an idea on who you're serving, who's your number one target audience segment, and what they want, what goals are they trying to achieve, and you continuously learn about that as you become more mature as a company and you have more insights. So I love to do monthly workshops where we kind of address these same topics again with all of the key stakeholders, so with marketing, with sales, with product, to see, are we still on the same page? Are we still serving the same people? Because that's really the number one issue that I've seen in most organizations, that the departments are running on different directions. Another idea that I like is this growth hacking idea that comes from Sean Ellis and Morgan Brown, which is more an idea that works post product market fit, right? Don't start it too quickly. But what I like about it is having these kind of tribes, almost these cross-departmental mini teams that bridge these silos. So I think you can take that mental model and bring it also pre-PMF and maybe work kind of in tribes. So say, look, we have a group that focuses on acquisition, retention, monetization, activation. So it kind of becomes part of your daily operations and not only a monthly thing.
Yeah, and in that sense, in that context, do you think that the product teams, let's say, working on these tribes and marketing teams should have absolutely the same goals and objectives?
That depends, right? I think it's very hard always to give like clear-cut answers. It really depends on your organization. They might not have to be, but they do have to serve the same people and have the same core value of the product in mind. Generally, I bet you've heard the term North Star metric, which is being thrown around left, right, and center. This is, of course, a great common goal. But besides that, of course, departments can have slightly separate goals, right? You also have separate products KPIs to meet, and marketing has their own KPIs. But they need to, of course, feed into the same North Star metric or whatever you want to call it.
Makes sense. Dankeschön.
Willie has a question.
Yeah. Hi, Alison. Thanks for the presentation. My question was, is time an enemy of PLG in the sense that, so a lot of people like to say we are agile, but they're actually waterfall, for example. A lot of people want to say we are a product-led company, but actually they're not. So when you talk about PLG, some of the principles are about experimentation mindset, understanding your customer personas. I've literally just had an email where I'm debating about how long does it take to come up with a persona? It's taken 9 months and we're still anywhere close. So how do you deal with some practicalities of time versus being product-led?
Yes, this is very hard, right? I don't know if this goes in the same vein, but I have this problem. Of course, I do a lot of this discovery work, so a lot of experimentation. Because I think you have to. I always tell companies you have to experiment, because if you think you're not experimenting, you're just pushing things out there. You are experimenting, you're just not measuring results, right? You might still be failing, your experiments are failing, you just don't know it. If you just start doing stuff without measuring, you're still experimenting, just not consciously. So let's at least think about it. But I have the same problem that companies ask me, for example, okay, when will we get from 0 to 1,000 users? I don't know, right? We're going into a test strategy somehow where we will learn. And hopefully after that test phase, we can make estimates. But this phase is very much about figuring out, again, who the target audience is, who the ICP is, what they care about, what problems are they facing, how can we solve those problems. There's just so much to learn. It is extremely difficult to give a clear-cut estimate and a clear-cut timing. That's kind of the nature of experimentation. You don't know yet what you are going to learn. And I have found that with some people that resonates, those are a good match for me. And with some people that does not, and that's fine too. It's just, you can lie and you can make up some time frame, but that's not my style, right? It's just the nature of experimentation is that you do not necessarily know the outcome. Yeah, sad but true. Does that answer your question, or did I drift a bit, of course?
Yeah, I think, let me play that. Does that simply mean you are just brutally honest? I'm not going to give you a timescale, it's just not realistic.
I'll give them a timescale on something that I can promise, right? Or that I can. So I can say, look, after 2 to 3 months, I can give you clarity on what value, like if we're really early stage, on who your number one target audience segment should be, what will resonate with them, and what goals they're trying to achieve, and how we can help them do that. So I can give you clarity on that. What that clarity means, we can figure out if we do a workshop together where we outline a test strategy together, where we set success metrics. We need these success metrics that we do together. I can't tell you what your success metrics will do. We have to do it together. And then if a couple of tests are passed, we say that this is validated. So we have made some learning. So that's something I can promise, and that fits with the methodology.
Yeah, thanks.
Also, with that in mind, if you're a PLG business, I guess if you're sales led, you've got the benefit of a sales team to identify prospects and push the product to and gather information for you. But if you're PLG, are there some roles that your teams need that you can get away with without, if you were a sales led organization, like in order to do these experiments or create these personas, are there some key people in your team that you absolutely need? Otherwise you can't do your work to find out these questions, answer these questions?
So I think the roles might be largely the same, but the type of people who exercise those roles are different. Of course, there has to be this willingness, firstly, to collaborate cross-departmentally. You can't have people who want to protect their little area. There has to be an openness. Me, when I was more junior, I had this urge to protect my little area. I had to grow up a little bit and mature a little bit to want to invite other people in and co-create with them. So that's not everybody can do that. There has to be this willingness to fail, right? Because some experiments fail. So it's not the roles, there's still marketing, there's still sales, maybe still products, or can still be all of these roles, but the type of people who are exercising them might need to be different.
So it's more of a cultural.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Scott?
I think jumping in on experimentation, I guess a lot of the discussion so far has almost felt like we're experimenting on customers and on users, and actually I found it to be very successful if you experiment with them. So you talk about the collaboration with sales and with marketing. Get the customer in the room. Now, whether that's literally in the room in front of the whiteboard, which is kind of what I like to do, or whether you go visit them in their environment, clearly this works better with enterprise. But you can run user panels with small to medium enterprises as well. And I think getting the customer involved. It's never ceased to amaze me just how much customers like to experiment, because they're going to get ahead of the curve, and you can sell them on things like, if you help us with this feature, you're going to get it 6 months ahead of your competitors are, for example, or 3 months, or 2 weeks, or whatever you want to sell to them. But bring the customers along on the ride as well, because you've got to keep them. Sales guys are the gatekeepers to the customers quite often in enterprise sales, so those things go together. But for me, one of my personal metrics is how many times a week does the sales team call me up and say, "Hey Scott, can you come along and have a chat with this customer or this prospect, because they want to learn about and want to join the journey of the product." And I think that's one of the keys to success that I found anyway.
I absolutely agree, 100%. So also experimentation for me also involves these kind of things, right? Experimentation is quite broad. Discovery and validation. So the discovery part, I think you involve customers quite a bit. One thing that I recommend a lot of early stage startups is to build a bench of trusted users, right? 5 or 10 or 15 people who are willing to give them feedback to whatever, right? Who are willing to get prototypes or look at the website, or maybe look at your headline for 3 seconds and tell you what they remembered. All of these little games that you can play. And so I agree with you completely. The only warning that I always give startups is to, of course, when a customer says jump, you don't ask how high. This is the starting point for your experimentation. Anything else?
Perfect. Any more questions? Anything to add? Anyone doing PLG? Anyone decided not to do it? I think that's it.
Yeah. Do you want to just go into the outro, the byproduct outro, Mike?
Yep, definitely.
Just going to say thank you to everybody who asked questions before we jump on. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I would have one more question. Sorry for being late. And also, I have to be quite transparent, and that I was not able to join the presentation. However, I was listening to the very interesting round now, and for me, there was, and that is one thing where we are currently challenging us, where to position us as an organization. Is it more in the SMB sector, or is in the enterprise sector? I see per se what I derive from that conversation, that PLG patterns or kind of strategies do beneficial apply more in the SMB sector, where hence you have a way higher scale in kind of acquiring, and also then the potential to experiment. However, what would be the kind of key fact, because I also see it very important in the enterprise sector to identify here customer need in order to also, hence your invests for enterprise services are regularly bigger than for SMB services. So what do you consider here as the big key point to consider if you want to also implement PLG strategies for enterprise customers, right? Is it because they're kind of often, there are similarities, right? But the delighters for them might be quite a bit different. Hence, these organizations are quite then also focused in their industry sector.
So exactly, I had a little section on this in the presentation, because I think enterprise is quite hard with PLG, especially the bigger the enterprise gets and the more muddy the hierarchical structures, and how the more difficult it gets to get to the decision maker. Because in the end, the idea of PLG in the B2B setting is that you target these end users. Within the company, a flywheel starts going and your product spreads within the organization, and you make it all the way up, right? So that your sales agent can knock on the door of the buyer and you can get in. But you need to make that bridge between the end user, 1, 10, 20, 100, and this end user problem towards the business problem. And if you have a really big enterprise with a really conflated structure, it's difficult, I think, to create this bridge. This is easier if the organization is smaller, if the end users just knock on the door and say, we have this problem, right? So most companies that I have worked with that really target enterprise customers, so 500 plus, 1,000 plus employees, have not used PLG for this, right? So they use PLG maybe to get started for the lower middle tier, to grow a customer base, and then add enterprise sales on top to target the enterprise customers.
Thank you for giving the heads up and about especially the topic I missed. But yeah, that was quite explaining. Thank you very much.
Perfect. And we'll probably cover this in the little outro, but just for the benefit of Christoph and anyone else, we'll be able to share the slides, and also we take the best bits out and add them onto our SoundCloud for anyone who missed anything. So that'll all be getting chopped up and put up on SoundCloud and shared probably next week.
Yeah. Also, if you just make me host again, I can share the presentation. Then we've got QR codes to our LinkedIn, our SoundCloud, and to join byProduct as well, if you're not already a member.
I will try.
We'll get there.
There we go.
Yep. Yeah, like Mike said as well, these will all be shared in the byProduct group after the event as well. I don't think we've got any takers for the next event as of yet, have we, Mike?
No. So if anyone's got any ideas of what you want to find out or discuss, or if there's anything you want to share, then we're all ears. You know, the whole point of this, I think Elsa kind of touched on it around PLG. Everyone's talking about it, and I just thought, not another acronym. So we found out actually what is PLG and whether or not you should be using it. I think the presentation's been really good and on the money.
It gives you a good opportunity to sell as well, as Elsa has subtly with Sonder House.
Yeah, 100%. If you need a consultant, then reach out to Elsa, and I'm sure she'll be more than happy to have a chat with you. And for those who aren't part of byProduct yet, then there's the QR code, and by all means follow us on LinkedIn. We quite often share takeaways and parts of the conversation on there as well.